So first thing we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about the APMC process, okay? So APMC analysis. So this is probably one of the nightmares that you heard from kids from last year is the work and time that it takes to goes into APMC analysis. I need to tell you a couple of things about this, okay? One, the reason why we do APMC analysis is because of this. Many years ago when I first started teaching AP, I have a spreadsheet and I still use it. I have a spreadsheet that I put in your multiple choice scores and then I put in your essay scores, okay? It will calculate a 1 through 5 for me on what you would get on the exam. What I found was if I moved the essays like up a point, it didn't really do anything to the overall score. You almost have to move every essay up a point to make a score, to make your score move, which is nearly impossible for you to make that big of a difference in May, right? To say that I misgraded 3 of your essays by a whole point, every one of them, okay? What I found is if I left all of the essay scores the same and changed and tweaked the multiple choice by 1 or 2 sometimes 3, 4, 5, but sometimes as little as 1, it makes the score go from a 2 to a 3, okay? Here's why. Your essays are worth 55%. Your multiple choice are worth 45%. Theory-wise, you're like, APMCs are not as important as essays. True, except for the fact that 55% of your grade is divided among 3 essays. So each essay is a third of 55%. Okay? So your APMCs in its entirety are 45%. So do you see how tweaking numbers, right, on your APMCs make a huge difference? So when I finally figured that out, that's when we began this APMC process. This will be my 3rd year, 4th year doing it, and I can tell you that it makes a huge difference, okay? So for me, kids that are borderline in the spring with their essays, the multiple choice is what has saved them. I guarantee you this is why we had 77% pass rate last year in class, because I had a group of kids that are borderline 2 to 3, but passed because of their multiple choice, not because of their essay, right? So what we do is we go through this very lengthy APMC process, and I'll tell you why we do it as we go on, because what it's going to do is going to help you to figure out where you go wrong most of the time, where you spend a lot of your time, where you shouldn't be spending a lot of your time, and how to see a question and see trends in the questions that College Board asks so that you can find the answers better and quicker. Okay? So that's why we're doing this. Does that make sense? The other thing I can tell you and I can promise you is that I will never, ever, ever give you busy work. Ever, ever, ever. I can promise you that. I know you're too busy for busy work. I'm too busy to grade busy work. So everything that we do, there is a purpose. It may not make sense to you, but in this crazy head of mine, there's some madness to it. There's some method to my madness, okay? So there is a reason why we do this. On average across the country, College Board says 50% is average, okay? And here, if you're starting anywhere between 30, 35%, anywhere above that, you're in good range, okay? Most of my kids, majority of my kids, by the spring, by March, when we take our mock exam, are about 70-75% pass. Okay? What that does, if you are 70-75% correct on the multiple choice, is it gives you a little wiggle room in an essay, right? So let's say we're all going to struggle on rhetorical analysis, which we all will all year long. If you increase that multiple choice, it gives you some wiggle room on that rhetorical analysis, but you still need to knock out the synthesis and argument, okay? So if you're walking in, which I have some kids that are 85-90%, you're already walking in with a high 1, almost a 2 on multiple choice, just by walking in 85-90%, okay? So my goal is to get you guys up around 70-75%. So what we'll do in the next couple of weeks, I'll give you a Google a Google sheet, like an Excel document, where you're going to track your APMC scores, and you'll see hopefully your percentage continue to rise. You'll have some dips because it will give you some really hard passages, but you'll see it hopefully continue to rise. Okay. None of your friends at other schools do this. They may do corrections. These are not corrections. These are anything but corrections. Okay? All right, so let's start with the multiple choice question. So what we've done is we have analyzed the question type. And the reason why we analyze the question type is because I feel like I want you to know what question is being asked, because I want you to know where you can spend your time. Some of these questions are not worth the time to spend because they are too hard and too long to figure out. So as we go through, you're going to become an expert at understanding what types of questions are asked. In the beginning, this takes a lot of time because you have to figure out what type of question each one is. Once you become more comfortable with the question types, it gets faster. Okay? All right, so we're going to write all over this APMC question type sheet. All right. So first of all, you have APMC, you have purpose and main idea. Okay? Purpose is going to have anything to do with the author. And if you notice, the questions either mention purpose or they mention why the author did something, right? Main idea is the whole passage. Or it could be a paragraph. Okay? Now, the other one that I could say with this is, if you can ask yourself, what does the author want us to see? That's what you can ask yourself in the questions. Sometimes you have to look at the answer choices, not just the question, and I'll show you examples of that here in a minute. Okay? So, author's purpose, main idea, it's one of the largest percentages of questions that you're given. It is also the hardest type of question asked. Okay? Because you have to read more closely. And what did I tell you about reading? You don't have time to read closely, right? You have time to quickly skim and get through. You don't have time to read it like you would a rhetorical analysis passage. Okay? Next, inferencing, attitude, and tone. What does it mean to inference? Yeah. Yeah, you assume from evidence, right? Based on evidence. Okay? Attitude, obviously, there's going to have an attitude or tone would be in there. So here you have tone. Okay, attitude, the author of the attitude towards blank is. Inference is going to be a lot. Like if you have to say, what does this best mean? Then you have to go in the passage and go, well, I have to read these two lines, and from those two lines I can infer this idea. That would be inference. Okay? So again, this is the second largest type of question. And guess what? It's also the second hardest type. So you can already see usually around 50% of the questions are author's purpose or inferencing. So we can understand why 50% is where we're going to be, right? All right, structure and organization. These are a little easier. And notice this is going to look at specific paragraphs or like the how it's laid out, right? So in context, paragraphs blank and blank primarily serve to, so why is it organized that way? Why is it structured that way? A major shift, paragraph blank is primarily developed by, right? So you're going in and looking at how the paragraph is organized, all right? These are easier. I would still say this first one could be under inferencing. So here's the thing. I'm not going to mark you off for labeling it incorrectly. I mean, some of them are pretty self-explanatory. Vocabulary, terminology, footnotes, those are pretty self-explanatory. Tone. There might be a few questions where you're like, it could be author's purpose and it could be inferencing. You decide where you feel it's more appropriate and put it underneath there. You wouldn't say that a footnote question is an inferencing question. Whatever you start labeling it, you keep it that way the whole year long. Does that make sense? So if you label this type of question as an inferencing, next time you see it, you continue to label it inferencing. Okay? Again, notice we're getting easier. Vocabulary and terminology, this is easier. Vocabulary is more in the context. Terminology is, think like AP terminology. And honestly, we don't have very many AP terminology type questions anymore. We used to have a lot of questions that were like all these rhetorical devices that nobody had ever heard of. And out of one of them would be like a metaphor. And then the other four, you'd have no idea what they were. We don't have a lot of those, but sometimes you need to understand those. So notice the difference. The vocabulary is usually in context, like what does something mean in context. And terminology is like AP language that you need to know, okay? But notice the types of question in the context, the tone of the line. So tone would be vocabulary, right? Because you're looking at the tone words, you have to understand what they mean, okay? Again, it's easier. Footnote, endnote. Do not miss. These are the easiest. You have to know MLA citation. So you wonder why for years we have harped on you? It's for that. They are the easiest types of questions because you just have to know, like a citation, right? Like a bibliography citation. But they're not your simple one author, one book, right? It's an article that was published in a journal that has now been published in another journal that has been edited and revised by another person, right? So you have to understand all the pieces and parts. Where's the publisher? When was it published? What does ED mean? Who is the author of the passage, not the article? Is it an article? Is it a book? Is it underlined? Is it in italics, right? So these are easy. Don't miss them. Out of 1 through like 12 to 15 questions that are in APMC, usually 1 or 2 is a footnote. And within passages of like 4 or 5 passages you're given, at least 1 or 2 of them have footnotes in them. Don't miss them. They're easy. Syntax and grammar, again, syntax and grammar syntax is like sentence structure and grammar are like grammatical terms, right? Again, these are easier. Okay? Major one, there's always at least one question about an antecedent. What is an antecedent? Oh, geez. An antecedent is a pronoun that renames the subject. Okay? So an example would be this. Subject, Smith. Okay, this is the antecedent for Smith. Greatest of all time. So do you see how easy that question is? But what happens is people don't know what an antecedent is, so they get it wrong. There's no reason why you should miss that, right? What do you need? Okay. So that's what this is, okay? So notice you need to keep this handy all year long because this will be something that you can identify with pretty easily, okay? All right, so now I need you to get out the questions for wind, and we're going to go through. Oh, wait, before we move forward. On the back of that, I want you to do answer types. So on the back of your question types, I need you to write answer types. All right. I'm not going to write anything down, but y'all need to listen, okay, and write stuff down. So out of 5 answer choices in multiple choice, all right, obviously you have 1 correct answer. Duh. Okay, so 1 answer is correct. Duh. Sometimes there's 2 that are correct. 1 is more correct than the other. That's not fair, right? 1 is more correct than the other. So there's 2 answers. 3, you can have what is called a distractor. Okay? A distractor means that it is a couple of things. One of a couple of things. 1, it could be half right, half wrong. Meaning, what they used to do is they used to put the half right part at the beginning of the answer and the wrong part at the end. So as you're quickly going through, you see the right answer and you go, that's right, but you didn't read the second half. That makes it untrue. Okay? So it's a distractor. It can also be a distractor if it is correct, but not for the portion of the passage they are asking you about. So it could be correct in the second half, but they're asking you about the first half. Does that make sense? Okay? So you have to look for the distractor. And then there's obviously going to be one that is obviously wrong. And a lot of times it's not very obvious. All right? So what you need to get good at is finding the distractor and find trends in the type of question or the type of distractor that they're asking you. All right? All right, so now let's look at question types. All right, so how about your yellow sheet? And let's walk through. I'm going to walk through and label all of these with you. All right? Question number 1. The author develops the passage primarily through, what would you say is the question type for that? Yeah, I put purpose last time, but I think it is structure. Yeah. Okay. Why? Because these are all things, right? Ways to organize. Okay. Number 2, the author is best described as. What type of question is that? Is it purpose? Look at the answer choices. Does the author, look at the answer choices. Remember we wrote up there, like, what does the author want us to understand? Yeah, I would say it would be inference. Why? Yeah, so we have to go back and read the whole passage and infer how the author is described. 3, compared with that of the rest of the passage, the diction of lines 1 through 8 is... I could go with either. I could go with structure, because if you're looking at the answer choices, it looks kind of like how it's organized, right? Or, what did y'all say? I don't think it's terminology. I could maybe go with vocab, because knowing that is like what you have to look at, right? Vocabulary. One of the things that I want to show you here, and it's a hint for APMCs and it's also a hint for SAT. If you can try to group your answers, it'll help you to eliminate chunks of answers. Okay? Correct answer for number 3 is what? B? Okay, watch. Informal, negative. Straightforward, negative. Technical, positive. Specialized, positive. Subjective, negative. Impressionistic, negative. Speculative, negative. Uncertain, negative. Understated, negative. Euphemistic, negative. What's your answer? The only one that is different. Okay? I probably could have said informal and straightforward is kind of positive, kind of neutral. So even if I did that as positive, I would have 2 answers that are positive, 3 answers that are negative. If I could figure out which one is more correct, I knock out a whole group of answer choices. Okay? Goes for APMCs, goes for SAT, goes for ACT. Okay? This is why you don't need an SAT prep class, because I am it. Number 4, you can pay me the money. Number 4, the statement, although survived, lines 7 through 8, is an admission that, what would you say is the best type of question? Inference. Why? Because you have to go back to those lines and infer what's in there. Infer what it is an admission of. Number 5, which of the following is true of the comparisons in lines 11 through 14? So here's where I think you have to go back to the answer choices and look at emphasize, exaggerate, use, draw, clarify. Does the author want us to does the author want to emphasize? Does the author want to exaggerate? Does the author want to use? So I would go to purpose. Again, look at grouping. Emphasize and exaggerate to me are very close. Use, draw, clarify, I would say are more similar. Correct answer on number 5 is what?
18.
So notice how you can mark out answer choices A and B by grouping. Okay? All right. What time do we get out of here? 40? 35? 35. Okay. Question number 6. I'm going to go a little bit faster, okay, so we can get to the analysis part. Number 6, again, look at the first sentence of the passage, employs all of the following. Look at your answer choices here. These would be what? Jargon, metaphor, parallel. No, we're not looking at sentence structure. Terminology. So this would be more looking at terminology. Not because it's a sentence question. You're looking at here, you have to go into the answer choices and look at those. The passage implies, inference. The passage moves from first paragraph to second paragraph would be organization or structure. The phrase, as bald as if a cyclonic wind, does all of the following except. So notice, describe, suggest, particularize, suggest, express. I don't think it's terminology. I would go back to purpose, yeah. Because in there I would say the author wants to describe, the author wants to suggest, the author wants to particularize. We have to figure out what the author wants us to understand. 10, in context, the image of being up under old Nell's skirt is meant to suggest. I think it would be more inference, yeah. Because I think you have to infer what is being meant. 11, which of the following best describes the images in the last sentence? I would say this one would probably be main idea. I probably could go under inference too. The second paragraph of the passage relies especially on the use of, now look at your answer choices. Terminology, yep. The passage ends on a note of, yeah, attitude, tone, or inference. Yeah, so I would say tone or inference. All right. So your first step when you do APMC analysis is to label the types of questions you missed. All right. We'll work on some more so you can ask me questions. Okay. But again, you can kind of see that as long as you can say, like, I feel like it's inference because of this, then I can go with you. Inference and terminology, they're really different, right? Inference and syntax or inference and footnotes are really different. So I can see that. All right, separate sheet of paper. This is the process that might be the death of you. All right, so this is, you're going to title it APMC Analysis. You're going to put the title of the passage. Sometimes we'll have multiple titles because we'll have multiple passages. Here's what you're going to do. Outside the margin, you're going to put the question number. We're going to start with question number 1. I'm going to highlight the steps because there are multiple steps to this. Okay? Very first step, I need you to paraphrase the question. Why would I want you to paraphrase the question? Make sure you understand it. So listen, I'm not doing busy work. This is for you to say, crap, I didn't even understand the question correctly. No wonder why I got it wrong. Right? All right. So the author develops the passage primarily through. So I would just say, how is the passage organized or developed? Step number 1. Step number 2. If there is a line or a paragraph or the passage discussed in the question, you need to paraphrase the line, paragraph, or passage. Step number 2. Why do I want you to paraphrase the line, paragraph, or passage that it's asking about? To understand it. Now you're going to have time to go back and read more closely. Okay? So here I need like probably 2, 3, 4 sentences For this one, that would paraphrase the whole passage. And this passage is pretty short. Okay? Now you're going to do the answer analysis. This is why I give you the correct answers. You are not just doing the correct answer. You are not just doing the answer that you got wrong. You are analyzing every single answer choice. Okay? And it differs depending on the type of question, how you do it. Okay, so let's look at the first one. So we're going to look at answer choice A, and we'll do accumulation of detail. Here, I basically need you to define it or paraphrase what that is. What does accumulation of detail mean?
Throughout the passage, more and more details are introduced to the reader.
Okay, so there is an increase in imagery, facts, details of the specific subject. Okay? Now, A is the correct answer, right? So I need proof of it. Proof being line 4 talks about the shape, and I'm totally making this up. Line 12 talks about the smell. Line 28 talks about the, feel. Does that make sense? So now I'm listing where in the passage that is. Okay? Then I go to question or answer choice B. Pro and con of an argument. What is the pro and con of an argument? You have to define it. What does that mean? What is a pro and con of an argument?
The good and bad.
Yeah, it's the good and bad. Now, for this one, you have to tell me what is the argument. Now, just because it's the wrong answer does not mean that there's not an argument in there. This could be the distractor, where there is an argument and there are only cons to it. Or there is an argument and there are only pros to it. So this would be the distractor. Do you understand that? So, what is the argument? Where is your proof? You may only have cons. Right? And then you could label this the distractor. Then we go to C. Thesis followed by qualification. Now you need to define thesis and you need to define qualification. And then, is there proof? Again, is there just a thesis in there and no qualification? Do you see where I'm going with this? And you do the same thing for D and for E. Does that make sense? Yes. Qualification is in the answer choice. Does that make sense? Yes.
Now, is this done just for the ones you missed?
Just for the ones you missed. We're not done yet. Next step. Yes. The last step is analysis of your answer choice. Why'd you get it wrong? Or where did you go wrong? This, I feel, is the most valuable. Because if you just say, I guessed, Why did you guess? Did you guess because you ran out of time? Did you guess because you didn't understand the passage? Like, you have to be specific to me, right? Did you, now that you've done your analysis, did you choose C, not understanding what thesis and qualification meant? And now looking back, you see why? I need you to be specific. This is the most valuable. This is where you're going to make the most leaps and bounds, is by looking at that and finding trends. Okay? So, I can tell you on average, this takes probably 30 to 35, 40 minutes per question that you miss. Okay? So when we're talking about homework, and I'm talking about giving you homework, and in the beginning I was like, man, if you can't give me 30 minutes on a weekend to read and annotate an article, there's no way you're giving me 2.5 hours on a weekend. Okay? Now, I can tell you this. When I give you this, I usually don't give you any other homework. When I give you this, I usually give it to you on a Tuesday or Wednesday, give you the week plus the weekend. It's usually due on a Monday or Tuesday. So I give you 5 to 7 days to do it. Okay? I know that it is a lot of time. So because of that, I reward you in 2 ways. One, our APMC scale is curved very friendly. Like, I think right now the lowest you can get if you miss all of them is a 60. Okay? So it's very friendly. 2, you get a grade for doing the APMC analysis. There's no way I'd make you do 2.5 hours of work and only give you a formative, which is what it is, right? You get 100, a 50, or a 0. 100, my way, all the way, 100. 50, your way, you know better than me, you get a 50. 0, you don't do it at all. If you get a 100, I put a 100 in the grade book, and I go back to your APMC score and increase it even more, above what has already been very friendly curved. So it's almost like a double quiz grade, or like a quiz grade, which we can't take quiz grades anymore. But I make it worth your time. Does that make sense? Again, I value your time, and I promise you I will not give you stuff that is not worth your time. And I've decreased the amount of work. I used to make them do every one they missed. Now I've gotten to where I make you just do 2 per question that you missed, question type that you missed. Okay? So that is how I make it worth your time. I promise you it's worth your time. I can also promise you if you don't do it, the zeros rack up really quickly, and your grade drops 6 to 8 points every time I put in a 0. Yes?
Like 2 more of the question type,
Every question type, yeah. So for every question type, you would do 2.